What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the channel. I am Harrison and you are here for Tutorial Tuesday. What is Tutorial Tuesday? Tutorial Tuesday is every single Tuesday I teach you how to draw some of your favorite characters. Today is none other than the mystic wizard herself, fortune teller, Baba.
How old are you anyway?
It's not polite to ask a lady her age.
Right, so how old are you?
Why, I never. Who do you think you are? You should learn some manners.
Fortune teller Baba is a very wacky, weird character from Dragon Ball. She is a staple that I felt like kind of got lost in the later arcs of Dragon Ball Z, but she always remained well in my mind as someone that helped Goku out in his younger years. So let's go ahead and draw her. She's going to be on top of her crystal ball floating around and being all goofy as she is. So why don't we grab our pencils, papers, sketchbooks, and Dragon Balls, and let's jump on into this drawing. So if today's drawing looks a little different than normal, it is because I have the sketchbook propped up on an easel. I am trying to fix my posture, just really fine-tune a little bit more. Instead of leaning over the table, I want my paper as parallel or perpendicular to my head that I am not having to bend over, crane my neck, and get some weird funky skewing with the drawing. This way it's all right in front of me and I can see everything perfectly without having to lean, bend, and hurt my neck. So if you have something that you can lean your art up on, I would recommend doing it. It really helps with your posture, really helps not hurting your neck and just having a sore neck. I will say it is something you do need to get used to. As far as drawing up, you're not resting your hand is kind of floating, you're leaning on your elbow a little bit more. It does also really help getting some very loose sketching. You don't need to press too hard. You're kind of really encouraged to be lightly drawing because your arm isn't resting on anything. You have to be more fluid and free with your movements. But anyway, let's start the drawing. So at the bottom of our page, we can draw in a nice round circle. This is going to be the crystal ball. Just above that circle, we can go ahead and draw another circle. This is going to be the body. And then on top of that, we can draw a smaller circle so it looks like a snowman, and this will be for her hat and head. So at the top of our first circle, right on the bottom where that second circle meets, we are going to start drawing Baba's knees. So because she is sitting on top of this, and I would like to think that she's sitting with her legs crossed, imagine that there are two C shapes on either side, a C shape and then a mirrored C shape on the other side. And in between that is a swoop that connects both. And right above that, draw another C shape for her arm, and then a line going up to kind of curve into the top of that circle. On the other side, we're going to mirror those exact lines. This is going to be her arms and shoulders. All of this right here does not need to be precise and perfect. We're just getting the sense of where we're going to put all these lines to form Baba. Now at the top of that second circle and the base of that third circle, we're going to draw a round cylinder shape, like a saucer type shape. This is going to be the brim of the hat. Now we want this to be in perspective. We want to show that there is a lot of dimension in this hat. So have the back of that saucer shape start just barely above the bottom of the base of the circle, and then loop it all the way around, have it dip into that middle circle, and then swoop it all the way back around. We will come back to define this, so you don't need to get hung up right here, but just kind of copy this general shape that I have. And the brim of the hat is skewed. It should be kind of longer on one end than the other, but this is your drawing. If you want it to be symmetrical, feel free to make it symmetrical. So I erased. I decided that these proportions were going to be way too tight. Baba's head was going to be way too small for the rest of the drawing. So I removed everything where that hat was going to go. So instead, let us draw a small circle right above that middle circle. This is going to be Baba's head, and we can just add in block shapes for her hair. These are just like trapezoid, triangle, square shapes. They don't need to be anything specific, but just have those come off the sides of that circle and head straight up to that third circle that's going to be originally for the top of her head. And at the very top of our new face circle, we can add in the lines for the brim of her hat. From here, we can go back to creating that saucer-like shape. And then feel free to add in the triangle pointed width shape of her hat. Her hat isn't pointed, but it does have a round tip at the very top, and it is angled off to the side. And then there is a little band that goes all the way across. And then, like most of the Dragon Ball drawings that we have done on this channel, let's pop her right into a frame. I really like when a lot of the edges are popping through the frame and some are left inside the frame, so it looks like the character is kind of coming towards you. It kind of just gives it a little bit more dimension and makes it not just like a static image. Now at the bottom, I am making her crystal ball a little bigger, which is why I'm drawing through the body that we already drew. I just want to make sure that it looks like she's actually sitting on something large and that it doesn't look like she can't fit on that ball. Using the eraser, I am cleaning up a lot of the lines. It's starting to get a little muddy with all of the corrections I'm making. So what I'm doing is just cleaning up, taking out a lot of the sketchy lines and adding in some of the more solid choices that I want to make. And then at the bottom where Baba's legs are, go ahead and draw another ball shape. This is going to be her hands. They're going to be intertwined like this. For the facial features, she is smiling from ear to ear. Her mouth is gonna be like a bean, just an elongated like bean shape. And then her eyes are not quite circles. I like to think of them as like a bow bun shape. They're rounded, but they're not exactly a complete circle. Go ahead and draw whatever shape makes sense to you that's almost a circle. And then her nose is like a weird W shape. Drop in her pupils and then give her scowling eyebrow lines. And now to move into some of the details. So from her eye lines, go ahead and draw lines that create her cheekbones that go to the edges of her mouth. And since Baba is an old character, make sure that her lips have lots of wrinkles, and then we can drop in some of her teeth. She only has a few, so make sure you get them. And then once you get those teeth, then shade in the mouth. You can now cap off her chin and really just solidify the edges of her face. And this is now where we can start adding some wrinkles around her eyes, around her mouth, and solidifying some of the choices that we started to put down, like just really locking in where her eyes are. And now we can start playing around with her hair. It is very stringy. There's a lot of different strands, so really just fill in that shape with hair strands. They can kind of be sporadic, they can be all straight lines. Her hair is kind of wild, so the more lines that you have intersecting and kind of overlapping, just the more wild it looks. Now moving on to her hat, let's go ahead and solidify that headband that's around the top of that hat. We are going to just lock in those lines, add in some detail for the cloth folding over and a few detail lines. And then we can just lock in some of those choices of shapes that we like and just leave the hat alone and jump on down to the hands. Because hands are very tricky, and of course Baba's hands are folded in on each other, you kind of just really need to trust the process of creating this hand shape. Her hands are literally interlinked like this. So if you imagine you're creating like almost like the letter E or the letter 3 like in bubble letters, and that's how I kind of deciphered how to do her hands like this. It wound up being easy, but sometimes doing hands, especially this way with this kind of a shape, can be very difficult. It's a very trust the process. I would play around with it, try to think of it like that, create bubble letter E's or 3's and then kind of round it off. Doesn't need to be perfect. If you don't want to have the hands, just don't put the hands. If you find it to be a little too difficult, it's okay. I won't tell anyone. So it's up to you, but think of it, try to always break down your shapes as best as you can. Try to think of ways that make sense to your mind. If something like this, for instance, looks like the number 3 or letter E, use that. Just draw in that letter or that number and then make it work for what you're trying to go for. Sometimes that's all we need to do to help our brains trick our hands to doing the things that we're trying to achieve.
Well, that explains it.
Now to finalize that crystal ball she's sitting on, we are just going to round off that circle and then add in the shimmer, shade in her hat, and lock in that box for the frame. I know we previously had 2 Tutorial Tuesdays where I didn't use dip pen and ink, but I'm sorry friends, we are back to the dip pen and ink on this week. So if you have it, use it. If not, you can totally achieve all of these techniques using a Sharpie or a fine liner. But as always with inking, I'm starting top to bottom, left to right, and just inking and using shadow and form to create the best image I can using thick and thin lines. I am just applying more pressure and letting up the pressure when I want to add thick or thin lines. To achieve this with a fine liner or a Sharpie, Sharpie, you're just gonna have to go over that line a few more times, make some edges a little thicker and a little thinner than normal. You might want to even try using different size nibs. A lot of these inking techniques are purely preference, so whatever you guys are feeling like you want to do for your drawing, do it. If you want to follow along with me, you can. It's all up to you. Drawing is whatever you want it to be.
Because this is your world and you can create anything that you want in it.
So the one really cool thing that I'm really proud about with my easel is I made this. I wanted it to have a certain functionality that I wasn't able to find in a lot of easels on Amazon or in stores. So what I did was pretty simple. I bought a laptop stand and I attached a Lazy Susan to it. And then I attached a clipboard to the back of that. And then I slide in my light box, and then I can just put my sketchbook or paper on there. And then it can do all sorts of things that I need it to do. It can rotate, spin, it can lean. And if I need to trace something, I can turn on the light box, or if I'm doing a hand-drawn animation, I have the light box. It's really perfect. I, at some point, would love to make a really nice refined version of this. This is kind of like the prototype, if you will. But if you are interested in learning more about my build here, I can do a full breakdown build video on this, and maybe in that process, we can kind of make something more permanent, more just better, I guess. Now, instead of using a brush and dip ink, I am using a brush pen. You can find brush pens on Amazon for a few dollars. A lot of inking sets come with a brush tip. This is just a refillable pen, and one that I am just trying to get more and more comfortable with every time I ink, and I am just using it to fill in our large black areas. Now I'm using the dip brush and ink. I realized about partway into using the brush pen that it was just going to be way too much ink to fill Baba, and I didn't want to waste all this ink on one character. I just wanted to save the brush for things that needed brush-like texture inking and not just use it to fill in something when I have a perfectly capable brush with ink that I can just fill up, and it's just savings, you know? The only thing I would suggest if you're going to use a brush is just be very careful with the size of your brush. This brush that I'm using has a chisel tip. It has a larger surface area than some of the finer tip brushes that there are. So sometimes those details like the mouth get a little complicated when you're trying to fill them in, which is why I switched back to the actual brush pen just to get some of those little tiny details. And that's really what I love the brush pen for, is filling in those really tiny tight details that the actual brush with the ink can't hit. And I'll find some good uses for it. I know I will. It's just trying to put it into the rotation and get more practice with it. Now let's create that border box for Baba. I am using my dip pen and a ruler here to get a nice crisp line. I am using a different nib. It is a nib designed to give a really thick line for outlines, thicker calligraphy. I'm still getting the hang of it. It's a tough nib to get. It doesn't really do the things that I want it to do. Hopefully one day I can really just come to understand it, but for now it's just a lot of trial and error. The ink flow is very different than my normal everyday driver, so it's just about more usage, more practicing. That's honestly every art tool is like that. Something that you have used for the first time, something that you've never used, you're never gonna get it right the first time you open that package and use it. It's going to be a lot of testing, a lot of finding the perfect use case for it. For me, with certain inking tools, it's a matter of just getting the proper amount of practice, making sure that I know how that tool works, what I can apply it to, and does it actually make sense for my workflow. Now, I wasn't really happy with the way that that tool created these lines. I just wasn't happy and I wanted something different. So I broke out the brush pen and just started kind of filling it in with lines. And this is a perfect use case for the brush pen. It gives you really nice flowy lines, but you have the freedom to kind of make these sort of free-handed lines that lend itself to the drawing here. Baba is a witch, so this kind of a style really lends into that kind of free-handed flowing of lines, and I thought it looks really good. Now, the last thing we need to do is wait. We have to wait at least 20 to 30 minutes. That is what I recommend before you all erase. Doing so will allow your ink to set and dry into the paper. That way when you erase, nothing will lift, smudge, and tear. So I always like to wait that long, just as a safety precaution. Now I am using a kneaded eraser. I do love a good plastic eraser, but I find the paper in my sketchbook does best with a kneaded eraser, and I like to work in circles. If you rub too hard back and forth, you may crinkle the page, rip the page. So light pressing of your eraser going in a circular motion kind of just makes everything nice and smooth. And now for some final touch-ups. I did notice a lot of my ink did smear, especially on the bottom at base near the crystal ball. So using the brush pen, I am going back in and just giving everything a little bit of thicker line so that I can hide some of my mistakes. And then using a white out pen, I am fixing a few little drips. Got a little drip in the eye, but honestly nothing that can't be fixed. And there we have it. There's Fortune Teller Baba. I had a lot of fun drawing this character. It definitely was different. It's one that I thought would be super easy to tackle, but wound up having a little bit more trouble, more hills to climb than I anticipated. And honestly, those are some of the most fun drawings because you walk into it thinking it's going to be super easy, and then you end up being challenged. And what better way to learn drawing than to be challenged by the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you got something out of today's lesson, give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing, and then once you do, hit that bell notification so you know when I upload the next tutorial Tuesday. If for some reason you did not enjoy today's video, please let me know in the comments why. Was there something I could do better next time to help you achieve the drawings that you are hoping to learn how to draw? And on that note, if there is a character that you have yet to see in our playlist, please let me know who you would like to know how to draw. That way I can add it to the playlist and help you achieve the drawings that you want to know how to draw. If you've been following along with Tutorial Tuesday for the last 4 months, I would love to see some of the work that you've been doing. Please tag me in any Instagram or TikTok videos and posts that you have following along my tutorials. I would love to see the work that you're doing. Go ahead and follow me on those social media platforms as well. You can see any of the other things that I'm up to day to day. Again, thank you so much for joining me on another awesome week of drawing. Keep drawing, keep practicing, don't give up. If it seems hard, start over, get fresh eyes on it, and you can always ask for help. Thanks guys, I'll see you next week.
Oh, listen up and listen well. I have a tale to tell. Baba is my name. Telling fortunes is my game. If it's lost and can't be found, I'm the friend you need around. Solving mysteries by the plan. I'll turn your frown upside down.